Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a brand new edition of Weekend World with Sophie at PTV World. Now, I am truly honored, humbled, privileged, and very excited about hosting this show tonight. And I'll tell you why in just a bit. But first up, there's a very popular saying by Mother Teresa. It goes something like this: if we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. So I'm going to be talking about this in just a bit. But right now, in the studios of PTV World, we have somebody who I've always admired. Now, let me briefly introduce her to all of you. She is an acclaimed Pakistani actress, a writer, a filmmaker, an animal lover, an environmentalist, and a human rights activist. Not just that, she is also associated with a family full of intellect and talent. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor and a privilege to be interviewing the one and only Feryal Gauhar. Assalamu alaikum ji, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you for a lovely introduction.
It's an honor to be interviewing you here tonight. The first question that I have for you is that you've been there, done that, you have so many feathers in your cap, and you believe in a lot of things in your life. What is going on in your mind right now that you feel very strongly about in life as we speak?
The fact that in a few days we will be in the Supreme Court in Islamabad. This is to pursue a petition that I, along with my colleagues, who constitute a small environmental activism group, we filed this petition after the Supreme Court had ordered the Punjab government to declare the Lahore Canal a heritage park.
Right.
In a country where we are actually living with less than the absolute essential forest cover that is necessary for sustainable living, we are busy cutting down more trees. And then when people like myself make a noise about it, government immediately comes up with their banners, plant trees, save the environment. Well, that's our slogan. This is a critical time in our history, politically as well as environmentally, and we have been extremely irresponsible in terms of treating the environment with care. It is our context, it is the physical and natural context within which we live. And there will be a 30% reduction, most probably, of the wheat production this year because of unseasonal rain. And that unseasonal rain has been set off as part of the manifestation of climate change.
Right.
Climate change happens because of a result of irresponsible behavior.
And that's the reality.
And that is a reality. And there was a time when Vice President Al Gore introduced the notion of the inconvenient truth. Well, it is still inconvenient. I mean, the rest of the world has woken up to this. Even the United States, which is one of the biggest, the largest polluters, contributors to greenhouse gases. Even the United States has woken up under the leadership of President Obama. But the most we see is the banners coming up after a complete massacre of the green cover has already taken place. We need the support of the people of Lahore and the people of this country to understand that the future is at stake, and it is us as members of civil society, people who are conscious, who have the information literally at our fingertips, who use such opportunities as the one you've given me.
So since we're talking about the environment, you've met with so many people, you've interacted with a lot of people from all walks of life. Do you think they're really bothered about the environment here in Pakistan?
No, I think the level of consciousness is extremely low. Ironically, the educated middle class needs to be educated because they are the decision makers. They're the ones who bring about
the change.
Yes, I mean, they are the agents of transformation. People whose lives depend on the environment are very, very aware of what we have done. So people who plant the seed, who nurture that crop, who harvest it, they know that every year they will have less and less and less with which to feed their children.
Yes.
And less with which they earn a livelihood. So, that is across the board, that is throughout this country. But it has always been the middle class which brings about significant change in society.
Which is the backbone of the society.
Yes, and we have a dwindling middle class. We hardly have one, worthy of the name, and it's shameful. It is something that I find absolutely appalling, Sophie. That you'll still see people going in their cars with a truckload of kids in the back and adults, And invariably, the window rolls down
Exactly.
and out gets a piece of tissue is chucked out, or a used
Wrappers.
a wrapper, the chips, the juice boxes. There is absolutely no respect for the earth on which we live,
Yes.
or for the country which has given us an identity. It's shameful. It's infuriating. It's the same thing. I mean, I'll get off a flight and I'm waiting for my baggage in the arrivals lounge, and right underneath the no smoking sign, you'll find a man light up.
Oh, definitely.
And if you dare to basically, refer to the sign, देखें जी ऊपर क्या लिखा हुआ है, वो तो it's amazing the umbrage, the sort of offense that is taken.
But there are always usually three replies to that. A, what's your problem? B, do you know who I am? And C, it's Pakistan, so anything can happen in Pakistan.
And it's quite possible that the person who says that to you has just come off the same flight from a Western country where they wouldn't dare
Exactly.
flout the law. Because here, of course, I mean, whenever I go to somebody in the airport who's wearing a uniform, to whom I appeal, and because actually smoking in public is forbidden, they just look at me completely helplessly. I think that it's part of the psyche of a political animal.
Reminds me of the book called Animal Farm.
Yes, very much so, George Orwell.
It really reminds me of that
Yes,
book, and
absolutely.
about the whole ideology and the dynamics of politics.
I'm actually going to ask the DC in Lahore, and I'm requesting him very soon, formally, to name my lane which leads into my house. I live in a lovely neighborhood with lovely neighbors. I want to name my lane Orwell Lane. It's because my house is called Animal Farm. And I wanted to honor George Orwell because he was a man...
Love his writing.
Oh, his writing and his politics. He was an anti-imperialist. He believed...
He was spot on.
Absolutely. He believed, in the right of the so-called native races to be treated with respect, which of course the Raj never did.
And I specifically remember the last line of his book, In Animal Farm, in which he mentioned the fact that the animals looked at the humans looked at the animals. And it was really hard to tell which was which. And that is exactly the case.
Yeah.
Here
Although,
in
I
our
mean,
society.
having lived with animals all my life, I have infinite regard and infinite respect. They bring so much joy, so much solace. I think they are a breed that is far more evolved than us as
Agreed.
humans.
I
There is
completely
no
agree.
malice. There is nothing that is nasty. They will never do anything to hurt you. And I think especially dogs who are absolutely reviled in our society in particular, there is such a joyousness about them, even a hungry dog.
They're very happy, aren't
Yeah,
they?
they'll just look at you and there's such an immense amount of trust.
And they wag their tails.
Yeah, and the eyes, I look at them and I look literally into their eyes and I ask them, who are you?
And there's a
What's
twinkle.
inside? Yeah, where is the soul? Because I believe that animals have souls.
They do.
Yeah, absolutely, and I believe they have consciousness, and
Of
I believe
course.
they have intelligence. And I can not say that necessarily for many human beings, that you and I come across.
True. I agree with
in terms
that.
of the intelligence or the soul or the consciousness. It seems to be missing to a great extent.
Agreed. And I feel that, when you have pets, they're more like your family members because they're beings with feelings and emotions. And I used to have dogs as well, ma'am. And I remember that, whenever I used to be sad, they used to cuddle me.
Yes.
They used to just come and just sit next to me.
My father passed away, he was ill. I was only 10. He was very young when he passed away. And we had many dogs. We had 7 dogs. And they started howling the night that he was dying. We didn't know that.
That was a sign.
Yes. And they refused to eat for 3 days. I've known, one of the donkeys that I had rescued, she was a little one. Her name was Dinky because she was so tiny. And her mother had been killed in a road accident, and she must have been tied along, with her to be trained to basically be a pack animal.
Of course.
So I rescued her because the owner had left the capsized cart and the dead mother on the side of the road.
They were abandoned.
Well, yes, I think he must have needed help, because he's a poor man. These animals are treated badly by people who are treated badly by a society which is inequitous and unjust. So it's a pecking order. So I rescued Dinky and I brought her home, and she needed to be literally bottle fed. So I was, doing that several times a day, and she could smell me, whenever I would come to feed her. I had to leave. I had a book that was coming out, and there was a launching, so I had to go out of the country for a week. When I came back, Dinky had died, because Dinky she wouldn't let anybody else feed her. So, they say that there is such a thing as a separation trauma.
That is true.
Yes, yes.
There's this element in dolphins as well. They're very sensitive.
They're very intelligent animals.
Very intelligent animals.
And they have a language.
They do, and they connect with humans instantly.
And elephants as well.
They do.
Yes, and my mother was from South Africa, and I still have a lot of family there. And on my last visit, I came to know of a gentleman who was white. Him and his wife ran a rescue setup in the reserve in South Africa for elephants who are poached and whose tusks are removed while they're still alive. And it's a very brutal, yes, it's a very brutal process. Many of them die, but he used to heal them. And he himself became ill with cancer, and the day he died, it is said that the matriarch of this herd of elephants actually led the herd to his house out of the forest, and they surrounded the house. I think there must have been about 18 of them, and she led them, and they literally encircled the house, and they bowed down until he was buried, and then they left.
That was the bond that they shared.
Yes, and they knew. I mean, they have a clear understanding of death. I have in my garden crows. We're very dismissive about crows because they're such a ubiquitous animal. They're all over the place.
Yes,
and
of course.
They're rather boisterous and raucous and loud, and they're not a thing of beauty, certainly. But I have many paintings in my house of crows because there's just certain ordinary, I love ordinary things. But what I find extraordinary about them is that in this season in particular, when the young have hatched, but now with the heat, they're also trying to fly. They're fledglings. They're trying to fly, and they get thirsty and they fall. If you happen to see a baby crow who's fallen, don't ever try to rescue one. They will get you. They will not let anybody near that creature, and they will try and pick him up themselves. So, I mean, how is it that they don't understand that this is one of us, and it's in distress, and we need to help? So, I think if we had a greater understanding of nature and a greater understanding of God's earth, we would be better people.
Completely
we would be more civilized, we would be more humane. I think living with animals has made me more compassionate towards all living creatures.
You're closer to nature, perhaps.
Yes, and I feel very whole. I feel, I'm not fractured. I feel I belong. I'm one with the earth. I can tell, I wake up in the morning and I know what day it is because there's a change in the light.
Right.
There's a change in the intensity of the light. There's a change in the darkness of the shadows. So I know that the season is changing, So, I mean, if you are that connected to nature, you can only love the science of it. The fact that there is such a predictability about nature, and we are the ones who are unpredictable. We are the ones who've just run, havoc. We've wreaked havoc on the earth, and we are now having to reap that harvest.
The Planning Commission of Pakistan, correct me if I'm mistaken, appreciated your contribution to poverty elevation. So 7 years ago, you completed a documentary titled Pakistan Poverty Assessment. And please enlighten us a little bit about that with respect to your research as well. We'd love to know more about that.
You've been doing a bit of research.
Yes, we have.
Yes, my training, my initial training is in political economy. I'm a student of political economy, and that is really the prism I use to even do my film work, or even in terms of the cultural heritage management that I now do, that I'm now engaged in. I use the prism of political economy, which is really understanding political policy in terms of, or vice versa, economic policy in terms of political thrusts,
right,
or political imperatives. So with each government, they will bring in, their own policy.
And their own flavor.
Yeah, depending on their priorities. So yes, I think it was somewhere in the early part of 2000, perhaps, that I was commissioned as part of a competitive process to make a film that would basically capture the research done by a number of non-governmental organizations. I think there were 18 involved across the country. The research essentially was based in 54 districts. We took 2 union councils and compared a poor and a non-poor union council. The idea was to gain an understanding of poverty from the experience of the poor themselves.
Right.
And this had never happened before. This was called the Participatory Poverty Assessment of Pakistan, and the film was highly rated and highly appreciated, but I don't know whether you'll be able to keep what I'm about to say. It was the Pakistan government at that time which actually forbid the film from being seen by parliamentarians because it told so many very bitter truths. And the number one finding of this 2-year research, I traveled extensively. I mean, because I shoot myself and I do the technical work myself. You asked me if I was tech savvy. Yes, I am Pakistan's first woman digital editor, so I do all my
there
work
you
myself.
Go.
I traveled from Kalam in Swat, also Azad Jammu Kashmir, also what was then Fana, the federally administered northern areas, which is now Gilgit-Baltistan, down to Keti Bandar, which is where the Indus meets the Indian Ocean. And it was for me a life changer. I had always been exposed to the lives of ordinary people because my father was a farmer and my mother was an anthropologist.
Yes,
and,
a very famous one.
Yes, and she was also a very compassionate human being. So she introduced us to the whole, the reality of this country being based on terrible conflict and terrible contradictions. And so we were familiar with, the rural poor in Punjab. But I was not prepared for the kind of poverty that I saw in the rest of this country.
What did you see?
I saw in Sindh not just the poverty of economics or opportunity, but poverty in terms of how people are treated. And you will have, the irony here is that you will have people who are supposedly representing the absolute poor sitting in parliament speaking on their behalf, who have no idea what the poor live like. So just as a case in point, in a small village near Badin, I mean, we lived in very difficult conditions because we didn't have a choice. And it was important for me also to understand how people live every day of their lives with absolutely no facility, no water, no drinking water. There were children who were walking miles in 48 to 50 degrees Celsius.
In search of clean water.
In search of clean water. And I followed them and I almost fainted. I followed them on what is called the LBOD, the Left Bank Outfall Drainage Canal. And they came back with water that was this color in a bottle of, a plastic.
And they survived.
And that is what I want to pay tribute to is the people of this country and the resilience. But the one story that I have never tired of telling, Sophie, and I'd like to share it with you since you asked, is when I was talking to the women, we had to speak, and use certain participatory research methodologies to elicit these responses. And with these women, I asked a very simple question. I had just come to learn that that particular morning, natural gas was being provided to that area. And so I wanted to know, what would be the relationship between the conservation of women's workload and the provision of this fuel. So I had an interpreter. I don't speak Sindhi, I understand some. And I asked her to ask the women around me. I was in their small goat. And there was silence when this question was asked, so I thought perhaps they haven't understood. So in Urdu, I rephrased the question, and one of the women, she said, no, we've understood. We just don't know whether you'll understand what we want to say to you. And her words have haunted me, ever since. I repeat them at every public forum where it's appropriate. She said, yes, of course, our workload will be lighter because we walk for miles to bring the fuel with which we light the fire, on which we cook the meal.
Right.
Very, very, very scanty, not nutritious meal. She said, but the burden of our hearts will be heavier, because we've been told that the fire from this fuel has no smoke. So how will we shed our tears? Because it is in the smoke of the wood fire that we shed our tears and we lighten our hearts. So, you know, just that wisdom,
It's very deep.
just that observation indicates to all of us listening to this that as a member of the privileged, educated elite, I have absolutely no idea about the depth and the profound nature of the understanding that the people of our country have about their own situations.
Of course.
And neither do the people representing them in Parliament. I think that, you know, if this is democracy, then I have serious issues with it.
True, but it's remarkable that, you know, people like you exist in today's time and age in our society, because you are the ones who are actually bringing about the wings of change here. And it's wonderful to see the kind of work you're doing, honestly, because, you know, you started off your career through the entertainment industry.
No, I didn't at all.
You know, because you were popular as Feryal Gauhar.
I didn't start my career at all. I mean, I was working as a research associate in the Economic Policy Research Unit. My first play was 10 years after I graduated from McGill University, and in those 10 years, I was the youngest teacher at university. I was 23 when I started teaching at university. I was a research associate with a very prestigious economic policy research unit. I mean, you know me because of television, but that's not my career. I mean,
Agreed,
television
completely
is certainly
agreed.
not my
See,
career.
that's what I wanted to basically highlight, the fact that people basically recognize you as somebody who's an amazing actress, who's a filmmaker now, who's a writer as well. But you know, it's really heartening to see that somebody who has the kind of power and aura that you have is doing so much for your community. And this is something that I've seen missing in people who have that kind of power and aura in our society today. So here's a question that I want to ask you. You used a word for us, and that was that we are very resilient. And you know, it's that one word that a lot of people use for us as well if you talk about the international community. Do you think that's a right word for us as of now? Are we a resilient nation?
Yeah, I think we are, because the way that our leadership has treated the ordinary person in Pakistan, I think the fact that we still open our hearts, and by we I mean the ordinary person in Pakistan, who doesn't know whether they would be able to afford a meal for their family by the end of the day. The minimum wage is certainly not good enough to support a family. The average family size is between 5 to 8 people. The fertility rate for women is about 4.1, and that's an average. You know, there are women who still have children, households where there are 12 to 16 children per one mother, you know. So if we have managed to survive violence, women in particular, children survive violence, and it's not just physical violence, it's all kinds of abuse. It's
emotional abuse.
Disrespect, yes, disrespect. And if men who are able-bodied and intelligent have never been granted the opportunity to reach their fullest potential because they've never been given the opportunity to be educated. So yes, they are resilient, because when I go and visit these communities, they will welcome me in their homes with the warmest and largest hearts that I've seen anywhere in the world. We are the most hospitable people. I have never come across people with such big hearts.
I would agree with that.
You know, when my mother, as an anthropologist, and she was working in Sindh with the Hindu communities, and her interest was particularly with the Shidi community, the people of African descent, because she herself was from South Africa, and she actually understood, or they understood, some of her Swahili, because many of these people came from the Sahel, where Swahili was spoken in East Africa. You know, she was just absolutely amazed. She said that the only thing that that family had to offer me was 1 carrot, and that was a luxury. That 1 carrot was washed and peeled and placed in a plate and offered to her as a guest of honor. So, you know, for me, I mean, that is just incredible, that people who have not seen a carrot, they don't know what it tastes like, they manage to find a carrot.
And it's the thought that counts.
Yeah, for my mother, yes. I mean, it's actually just the very fact that the less people have, the more they are willing to share. And the more people have, the less they are willing to share.
I completely agree with that. This is something I have also observed, you know, whenever I interact with such people as well. This is something I've always felt. You're completely right about that. So wonderful. So moving on, as far as, you know, we've talked about this part of the society, and we've talked about the Go Green campaign that we should be talking about in future as well. But right now, I also want to highlight your entertainment aspect in your life. And this is something that I've always been a huge fan of because I've seen you on this screen and I've admired you as an actress. So what really made you enter the entertainment industry?
Nothing. I mean, it's I don't think that it holds any significance for me, really. I mean, I used to say this as a 23-year-old, and I was cheeky then, and I'm a little less cheeky now, but
still cheeky, huh?
Yeah, certainly, because I have a very high IQ. I don't know whether that's apparent or not, but you know, I don't suffer fools very easily, and I don't have the patience for it. I was always top of my class. I mean, I was always a distinction holder. So when somebody from television came and said to me that, you know, कैसे लगता है आपको इतने थोड़े अरसे में आपने इतनी शोहरत पाई? And I said, देखें जिस मुल्क में, and I hope your viewers understand this, I can translate it, but जिस मुल्क में हवाई नहीं चलती तो वहाँ कोई अगर डिकार भी मार देना तो लोग समझते हैं कि तूफान आ गया. So I mean, I don't really think that I'm of any significance. I mean, I think I'm a very mediocre actor.
I think you're being very modest as of
I'm
now.
Not, I'm not.
Very,
I mean,
very
I'm a very arrogant person, so I'm not modest at all. I'm arrogant about my other, what I believe are my achievements, you know, my real achievements. This is hardly an achievement. I mean, you know, let's face it. What does it take? आप बस एक चेहरा लेकर आ जाते हैं, you know, you sit in front of 3 technicians and you know, your image is beamed to a lot of households. What is it that you've achieved?
You might have tugged the hearts of many.
Well, perhaps the scripts that I did, and there were only 2, you know, only 2 serials that I actually did. People remember me for much more, which I never did.
For your grace and beauty as well.
But that's very kind of people. I mean, I don't think I'm either of either. I just think people are very, very kind. But no, I mean, this is a fact. We don't have very high standards of anything. We really don't. We are a nation, other than the resilience of the absolute poor, we are a nation who has very little sense of pride in who we really are. So amongst the literati or amongst the intelligentsia, anything that comes from across the border, and you know which border I'm talking about, is always going to be lauded and applauded and will be literally
stamped of,
oh yes,
हम
मतलब बिच जाएंगे.
Of course.
हम तो बिल्कुल मतलब हम तो कुछ भी नहीं है उनके मुकाबले में. I challenge anybody from across that border to stand up to us as actors. I mean, we can act their pants off.
Oh yes, definitely.
Act their dhotis off.
Oh,
act their
definitely.
lungis off, you know.
Oh yes.
Yes. So why is it that, I mean, I hate to say this, I mean, you know, I hate to personalize the discussion, but I mean, you know, we have many Nasiruddin Shahs. I mean, I don't want to rattle off the names because I'd be leaving out so many. We have many Shabana Azmis. You know, what's the big deal? I don't understand this. I mean, हमें फख्र क्यों नहीं अपने आप पर?
Bushra Ansari, Durdana Barchi.
Uzma Gilani, Ruhi Bano, Shehnaz Sheikh.
So many of them.
I mean, we have talent coming out of, you know, every orifice. I mean, we are incredibly talented people. Incredibly talented people. Hamare log, you know, we give an opportunity. Many of them find the opportunity abroad. Some of them have found it across the border, right? But, I mean, the top cardiologists in the world are Pakistanis. Neuroscientists are Pakistanis, miniature artists are Pakistanis, squash players are Pakistanis.
And one of the most popular singers are also Pakistanis.
So in the arts, in the sciences, I mean, we've got, you know, we must acknowledge the Nobel Peace Prize,
yes.
Not just Malala's, but Professor Abdul Salam's.
And even an Oscar, Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy.
Yes, but before Sharmeen, there were young people who were already, had already won Oscars.
Yes, that's true.
You know, so there needs to be a correction of that historical chronology that won the Oscar for animation.
Yes.
And that's you know an area where I will be now exploring some of the talent that we have through a project that I'm hoping to be able to put together. So which is very, very close to my heart, and which is, I mean, we could talk about that later.
Oh, definitely. We are definitely going to be talking about that. Ladies and gentlemen, just stay tuned in. Keep on watching Weekend World with Sophie at PTV World. We are in conversation with the very lovely, the very talented, the woman with a lot of feathers in her cap, the one and only Feryal Gauhar. Keep on watching Weekend World. Stay with us. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Of course, you're watching Weekend World with Sophie at PTV World. As the saying goes, you can never become poor by giving. So that is exactly what we're talking about here on the show as well. Of course, apart from that, we're talking about the environment. And right now, we should also be talking about the entertainment industry. Of course, we are in conversation with the one and only Feryal Gauhar. So moving on, now I have a question for you. You know, we talked about the environment, then we talked about a lot of other issues pertaining to our society. Now let's know more about the human being, the person that you are, the individual that you are, Feryal Gauhar, that people don't really know about. Starting from food, are you a foodie?
Absolutely, isn't it quite obvious?
What do you like eating?
Everything, anything that doesn't move. Yes, anything that's dead.
Okay, so do you like desi food a lot?
Everything. I just love food. I think it's you know, it's the greatest blessing, and you know, it's a bit of a problem as well.
Really? Is there a food item that you cannot help but, you know, you cannot
No,
resist?
there's nothing that I cannot not eat.
Okay.
I eat everything.
Wonderful.
My favorites, dal chawal, shaljam, bhindi.
All the vegetables.
All the vegetables, all dals. I'm a carnivore, regardless of being an animal rights activist, because that is actually very much part of the food chain.
Right, of course.
And it's not.
You don't have to be a vegan in order to be an animal lover.
No, not at all, not at all. Humans are carnivorous. I mean, that is a fact. You can choose to be a vegetarian.
Cycle of life.
Yeah. But it's Thai food that I just absolutely relish.
I love
And
it.
Vietnamese food is just to die for.
Do we get good Thai food here in Pakistan?
Not
really.
I make it myself.
Nice. So you like cooking as well?
No, I just love making breakfast for friends.
Oh, nice. Okay,
And,
tell us about your specialities.
Well, for breakfast, I make a very wonderful cheese and basil omelette.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, anything that you do for friends, you do with love.
That's true.
So, and I love having like a leisurely Saturday morning or and a lot of it is in my mind because I hardly ever meet anyone. So I entertain people in my head without actually going into the kitchen.
Oh my.
So
So tell me about your best friends as well. Tell me about the kind of friends that surround you. Are you the social
I'm a
kind?
hermit. No,
I'm
not
guessing
at
you're
all.
not.
No. I hardly meet anyone. I'm very reclusive. I always was. I'm gregarious if the occasion demands this. But I have very good comrades. You know, we have a wonderful working relationship for the activism that I'm engaged in. And you get to know them, you know, such people on a personal level as well. My students are my very dear friends. One of them is an amazing jewelry designer now. Another one is a filmmaker. Another, you know, they both head their departments at the National College of Arts. Very, very dear to me. And I have a lot of younger friends. I have a lot of older friends, people who are, you know, between 15 to 20 years older, and people who are 15 to 20 years younger. So very few who are my own age. And you know, I just find that even if I meet a friend after 16 years, we manage to pick up from where we left off. So I hardly need to be in touch.
So the kick in that chemistry always creeps in whenever you meet them.
Yes, because you know, you've obviously enjoyed each other's values.
Agreed.
And maybe each other's experience. So you know, so I don't use social media much at all. I was forced to set up a Facebook page. In fact, somebody had to set it up for me.
Okay.
Because I was completely illiterate in that department, because I was completely averse to the whole notion of my privacy being violated. But because there were so many fake pages in my name, and since I travel frequently, at every airport I would be asked, "Aapne ji mere sawal ka jawab nahi diya," and I said, "Aap kaun?" "Ki ji hum Facebook pe friends hain." And I would look at them and I say, "I'm not on Facebook."
Exactly.
And then they would have this almost like oh my God, you know, moment. What do you say when you realize that you've been taken for a ride by some obviously psychologically disturbed person who has co-opted my identity? I mean, that could be a man, it could be a woman.
Of course,
who
anyone.
pretends to be me. And there are several such people out there who use my images, who pretend. I mean, they have photographs of my childhood. They have invaded my home. I mean, I don't know how. They're either fed by intelligence agencies.
But apparently they have a lot of time on their hands.
A lot of time, and obviously no self-esteem.
Of course.
You know, for them to have to live through somebody else.
Yes, that's
So,
very, very shallow.
Yeah,
of them.
so my lawyer, because, you know, this was becoming extremely distressing. And since I am, you know, I'm politically quite outspoken, and I didn't want views that were not mine being projected through this kind of media. And so my lawyer suggested that I set up my own page so that there is always a genuine presence in case there is something controversial which can cost me my life.
Of course.
I would be able to at least, you know, have
Rectify.
evidence, yes, that, you know, this is not my point of view. Yeah, so.
Wonderful. Sounds good. So are you a collector? Do you like collecting anything in particular?
I'm trying to not collect anymore. I'm trying to give away. I collect carpets,
Okay.
antiques. I collect antique silver, and I collect art. I collect, you know, authentic art. So my house is full of paintings, carpets, and antique silver.
Wow.
And I'm hoping that, you know, when I die, my nieces and nephews would cherish it. Some of my collection, which has come to me as gifts, are actually museum pieces, so they will be gifted to museums. Otherwise, you know, being a cultural heritage management specialist, I know that owning antiquities or keeping them from, you know, public enjoyment is not to be encouraged. So that's why I have a collection of 6 goddesses from the Mehergar civilization, which I will be bequeathing to one of the museums of my choice. And I have which something I found, and I believe that it was gifted to me by some divine force. It's a 6th or 7th century Buddha, which is called the Padmapani Buddha because he holds a lotus flower. So Padma is the lotus.
Yes, yes.
And this is very strangely, I found it when I moved into my house in Zaman Park, and it was actually lying under some old debris. And I don't know how it got there, but it's a piece that large, and it's now embedded in one of the walls. I mean, it's there for people to see. But why I find it so amazing is because eventually I came to know its history by virtue of the fact that I was asked to work as the project consultant for the Italian Archaeological Mission, working in Swat.
Right.
And this piece actually is from Swat. So I learned that somewhere before partition, there was a Hindu merchant who used to basically export these antiquities.
Okay.
And this might have been where he lived, because it was found in the earth.
I'd like to believe it was God sent, and I'd like to believe it was a miracle, and there's
Well,
magic
I've
involved.
received things which nobody has brought. I mean, you know, you might think I'm now verging on the supernatural.
No,
but
no, no, no,
I
not
believe
at
in the
all.
supernatural. I have received gifts which nobody has brought. I mean, they've been placed at my doorstep.
Wow.
So, and that includes animals as well. You know, I find animals put in little bags and hung on my gate, which obviously people know that I will
Take
look
care
after
of them, of course.
But actually, you know, I found gifts outside my front door. I don't know where they come from.
Well, I'd like to believe that it's magic. Speaking of magic, by the way, you are magical on screen as well.
You love to go back to
Oh,
the screen.
yes, I do. I do. So tell me about the golden moments of your career in the entertainment industry and your favorite co-stars as well.
Well, I mean, I'm very happy to talk about my favorite co-star. I've only done 2 serials, so, you know, give me a break, Sophie. It's hardly much to talk about. My favorite co-star, and I think my favorite of all times, was Shafi Muhammad. The late Shafi Muhammad was a very
fantastic.
regal man.
Oh, yes.
He's a very regal. He was a Shah. He was a Sayyid in the true sense of that word. And I mean, his talent was just, I mean, this is why I say, you know, why are we always looking across the border? ये हमारे अपने लोग हैं और उनकी हम कदर नहीं करते, you know. So I didn't even realize that, you know, being set up as his wife in this the serial that I first did,
Yes.
called Chand Girhan, you know, that I was contending with probably the biggest heavyweight of Pakistani television.
Top notch.
Yeah, because I didn't ever take myself seriously, so I never really took anybody else seriously. And it's only years later when I saw the serial, now, you know, available on DVD, that I realized how wonderful he was. And of course, we got to know each other as people. The other person who I really enjoy and have an incredible amount of respect for and love is Shakil, the actor Shakil. And I mean, he is beautiful inside and out. He is a person who is khandani in every sense of that word.
Cultured.
Yes, he's cultured, he's refined, he's kind, he's a lovely sense of humor, he doesn't take himself seriously, he's not arrogant.
That's
you
the
know?
key. You should never take yourself too seriously.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, you're just mortal, you're just flesh and bones, you know, you're nothing more than that. So, ye log, because मैंने और कोई काम किया नहीं ना, and in the second serial, which was 10 years later, I happened to be acting as the wife of a man who was my tenant and who would never pay me rent. So it was something that I would always feel a little, you know, hesitant about, because we'd always been fighting about this. And here I was now, his wife, who decides in her infinite wisdom to have him married off to another woman because I'm unable to produce a child for him. Of course, nobody ever talks about the fact that in many cases it's men who can't produce children, but of course we presume that it's a woman who's barren. This actor was Javed Sheikh, and I think he's lovely as a person. I find him brilliant as a comic actor. He has done brilliantly in a film that I have absolutely loved, and I will, you know, proudly say that I think this is the best film that has been brought out in the last couple of years by young filmmakers. Na Malum Afraad.
Oh yes, I loved watching it.
It's, I mean, the others were so completely pretentious. I don't even want to refer to them.
But it was so real. Like, you could relate to the circumstances and the situations and the shots.
It was humorous. I mean, it was
Yes.
humorous, and yet, you know, talked about something that was very real. There was pathos, and all of that was embodied in Javed Sheikh.
Oh yes.
And all the, I mean, just even the set design, the fact that whoever designed the set actually was so conscious of detail.
Yes.
I love detail, and you know, there were marigolds everywhere in that particular house.
Thorough. It was thorough.
It was a lovely film.
Agreed.
And, you know, my kudos. I mean, like, hats off to
I
that team.
completely agree. Hats
मुझे
off
भी
for
रखें
sure.
अगली बार. मैं भी थोड़ी बहुत अदाकारी कर लेती हूँ.
Which reminds me, by the way, that you also had a role in Tamanna. So let's talk about that experience of yours with respect to the film called Tamanna.
So you really want to, I mean, yeah, it's like, I mean, must we? You know, like, do we have to talk about things which are of no
Since
no
we're talking
consequence?
about everything under the sun.
Yeah, you know, my take on Tamanna is that it was a good effort. I mean, it was marketed as the first noir film, and I find that highly almost ironic in an ironic sort of a sense, because it was literally dark. I mean, not just dark thematically, because it was, you know, it's a film that was not an original script. It was adapted. It may not even have been appropriate for adaptation, but I had already had that argument with the producer, who is a lovely person, and she, you know, I did the film because she is such a lovely person. I had my reservations about the script, but here's my take on the work that I have done, which has not necessarily been massively successful. For me, the journey is more important. The product is not. It's not of great consequence. I find that I learn something, and if I can contribute something to that process, well and good. Working with Sara Tareen was brilliant. She's extremely well organized, and she's a lovely person. And I think that it was well intended. The film, I think, had wonderful moments of great acting, but it was not a film that would be, I think, maybe absorbed for what they were trying to do. And as far as my participation in it was concerned, there was actually no such character in the script. I had been asked by Sara to do a music video. They had a beautiful track by Rahat Fateh Ali. and I'm proud to have been associated with that. It was well done. They used that video basically to raise the funding. And once the video became popular and they succeeded in raising the funding, they asked whether then I would then also lend myself to the film. There was no character. They had to write a character after a major portion of the film had already been shot.
Right.
So therefore you see me, you know, in sort of a cameo appearance right at the top and at the end.
Yes.
So, you know, I wish them all luck in their next venture. I personally prefer doing scripts which are organic, which are, you know, rooted in our reality, and which are meaningful to me in terms of the issues that are important to me.
Completely agree. So what exactly are you working on these days?
At the moment, I'm contracted as a consultant to the project which is providing the due diligence reporting on the Diamar Basha Dam. I look after the cultural heritage management component. I was the coordinator for the writing of the last cultural heritage management plan that was commissioned by WAPDA.
Right.
This is an absolute, it's an essential requirement by the international lending institutions who provide the, you know, the budgets, the funding, and they will not provide the funding until the environmental and social impact assessments have been conducted. This is something very new for Pakistan. So the quality of the planning for environment, cultural heritage and the resettlement, which is social, has not been up to par, has not been up to the international standards. So I have been working with an international consultancy to try to bring the cultural heritage management plan up to chuff,
right,
up to the international standards,
right,
in order to qualify Pakistan as literally as a creditor for the loan that is required to build the Diamar Basha Dam. And I'm very committed to that. It is something that I have been engaged in for the last 7 or 8 years.
And this is a great cause. This is
well, yes, it grew out of my PhD research. So that is where I did my research in the area where the dam is to be built. And so it's just something that was a natural consequence of having worked there and studied the area. And so naturally there are very few.
It had to happen.
Yeah, there are very few people who have actually done that, you know, and I personally feel very enriched, despite the fact that it's been a very difficult task to be a woman and to work in a very hostile environment. But I think that in historical sort of perspectives, I will have contributed, you know, my little bit to perhaps a better and more secure future for our country.
Definitely, of course, then we should bear the fruit for that. So it was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. But before anything else, now we have a segment and it's going to be very interesting. We have giveaways courtesy of Weekend World, as you can see, of course, but you need to earn those giveaways.
It's got a little elf in it.
Yes.
It's got a little pixie.
Might have a cute little bunny as well. Right, that got you excited. I knew that made you excited, for sure. Okay, so basically, let me tell you the rules of the game, okay? Now you have to tell me the first word that comes to your mind when I mention the following words, but within 2 seconds. Are you ready? Otherwise, the buzzer would sound, okay? All right, your time starts now. Love.
Dog.
Food.
Ice cream.
Animals.
Love.
Pakistan.
Love.
Life.
Love.
Humanity.
Love.
You're not allowed to say love anymore. Cheating.
Love.
Lying.
Ice cream.
Oh, come on. Success. Acting.
Inconsequential. Inconsequential.
Second chances.
Necessary.
Hypocrisy.
Defeating.
Weekend World.
Weekend World. Fabulous.
Awesome. That is exactly why I asked you this question. So good job. I think you definitely deserve that.
Do I get the bunny? Do I get the bunny?
You will definitely get the bunny now. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It was wonderful to see you. Wonderful to interact with you, wonderful to meet you, and you have made the entire nation proud for being yourself, and for people like you, you know, the change will always be present in our society. So thank you so much, ma'am, for being here tonight.
You humble me. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it was a pleasure hosting a show for you. Thank you so much for watching Weekend World with Sophie at PTV World. We should be back, inshallah, with another episode. And before we sign out of this conversation, as always, we do have a saying for you. Bob Marley said something very interesting, short and sweet, goes something like this: one love, one heart, one destiny. On that note, God bless us. God bless this country. Bye-bye.